Good afternoon, and thank you for stepping into the Foul Playland. As always, I'm your Foul Player. I wanted to talk about one of the arguments that was used in the past regarding why Wilder wasn't a, uh, a sellable product, um, especially when they would compare him to Anthony Joshua and other fighters, and that was ticket sales. Um, of late, and this has more to do with one of the venues, which is the Barclays Center here in New York City. Well, actually, I'm in Florida right now, but it's based in not too far from my hometown or my block in Brooklyn, on Fourth Avenue, in the cross sections of Atlantic and Fourth Avenue, and that's the Barclays Center. Deontay Wilder had a lot of his fights in the latter portion of his or the more recent portion of his career at the Barclays Center. One of the only fights that he didn't have at the Barclays Center was when he had the fight at the Staples Center in Los Angeles against Tyson Fury. Besides that, he's been pretty much a mainstay at the Barclays Center. And I wanted to make a small comparison. Well, not a comparison, but with the Barclays Center, it's a very what people don't know, and what I know personally, or not personally, I mean you could research it yourself, is how hard of a sell the actual Barclays Center is. The Brooklyn Nets make their home at the Barclays Center, and they're a basketball team within the NBA. Their teams they sucked for the past couple years. When they first came to Brooklyn, or around the time they first came to Brooklyn, they made the mistake of making a trade with the Boston Celtics for Kevin Garnett, Jason Terry, I believe, and Paul Pierce. And they at that time they had Joe Johnson as their starting shooting guard and Deron Williams as their starting point guard, and they added those three players to their core. They mortgaged a lot of their future in doing so, so that made them suck for a lot of years moving forward. But the immediate result of that trade was that the Nets got fleeced. I mean, it's actually probably the worst trade I remember in basketball that I could remember offhand in basketball history. And they went into, and that was like right when they got to the Barclays Center, and the team sucked as is, even immediately after that trade. But they sucked for years after because they mortgaged away so many top draft picks that the Celtics were able to utilize or use and pick players really high. I think one of those players, one of the last players that they picked from that deal was actually this past year, or the year before last. I forgot who they picked. I think it was I forgot his name. Not Rozier, but he's pretty. Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum, I think, was the last pick of that haul. So it goes to show you. I think that trade happened. I think it happened before 2014, and they was still paying for it, and they still sucked. But the Nets always historically had a really, really hard time of selling, not even selling out, selling anything at the Barclays. I mean, just because they sucked had a large part to do with it, but they weren't the only team that had a hard time selling there. And mind you, Brooklyn or all New York, we're a very basketball crazy town when our teams are doing well, particularly. But to their defense, they weren't doing well, so they really couldn't sell. But now that they have Kevin Durant, and damn, I always forget this motherfucker's name. But next year, I could easily predict at the time of this video that they have a little bit better team, and they're still gonna have a hard time selling. because it's hard to sell at that arena. Um, the New York Islanders in the National Hockey League, they also made Brooklyn their home for the past couple of years because they had a falling out with their owner, with the Nassau County in Long Island, and they didn't want to build them a new stadium, so they moved to Brooklyn. I think it's for the past 4 years, and they're getting set to move back to Nassau County. But since they've moved to Brooklyn, the Islanders also have had a terrible time of selling out the Barclays Center. And they didn't have that problem in Nassau County. It's just that the Nassau County stadium was antiquated, where there were teams putting millions of dollars into their stadiums every year, as far as like for fixing. The year where the Islanders were set on moving, I think Nassau County supposedly gave them $400 for repair, $400, like $400, like for repairs, where other counties and other cities were giving their respective teams, millions, like to reinvest in the team and in the areas around the stadiums or in the stadiums. Nassau County actually gave the Islanders $400, and they decided to move shortly thereafter. But while they were in Nassau County, they were actually a bigger draw than they were in Brooklyn. When they were in Brooklyn, and it's not that they were the Long Island Islanders, they were the New York Islanders. They should have changed to the Brooklyn Islanders. They want to have a little bit more of an impact, but whatever. They went with the New York Islanders when they moved, or they stood with the New York Islander moniker, like when they moved to Brooklyn, and they were having a terrible time selling it. People were bitching immediately, and that team didn't suck. Like they actually made it to the playoffs a couple of years while they were in Brooklyn, and it had like zero impact. Like the only games that would sell well were when the New York Rangers would visit them at the Barclays Center. But and I'll make a comparison too as far as AJ's sales with when he had his only fight with Andy Ruiz in Madison Square Garden on June 1st. When they had that fight, some people were trumpeting the fact that Anthony Joshua supposedly had record-selling pre-sale numbers, which I mean, a lot of people were finding that not to be true, that the pre-sale numbers weren't available to the paying public, that they were only available to certain parties, some which were rumored to be Matchroom insiders. But but the pre-sale numbers supposedly sold at a record-setting pace, as we all know, like which was like widely trumpeted by Matchroom. But then when it came time to the night of the fight and the days really close to the fight, there were a lot of tickets that were still available to be bought on secondary sites like StubHub. There were thousands when I checked minutes before the fight. I'm pretty sure a lot of the tickets were given away like after the fact, but I could pretty much assure you that fight didn't sell as well as any of Wilder's more recent fights at the Barclays Center. And MSG is not a hard venue to sell. In fact, the New York Knicks play at Madison Square Garden, and the New York Knicks are one of the worst teams in the NBA. In fact, last year they were actually the worst team in the NBA. I forgot how many wins they had offhand. I think they had 17 wins for the entirety of the year. It may have been 13. I'm not sure. I can't recall offhand. But they were the worst team in the NBA. And I could guarantee you that if the Knicks aren't that the Knicks are a top 3 selling ticket seller in the NBA. And that's not because the people have this are enamored by the Knicks and like because there's like this cachet that goes with the Knicks. Nah, I mean it's just that it's very easy to sell at MSG because of where it is logistically. It's on 34th Street in Midtown Manhattan, one of the busiest areas in the city. A lot of people who are executives at corporations nearby or traders in the stock market It's kind of like a cool thing to have like floor seats or close to floor seats at MSG. So any concert, any sporting event at MSG, it's like a cool thing like to have like seats that are, or to have any seats, to be frank. I mean, like, they're very hard to come by. To go to a Knick game, for a regular ticket, it's like $300. And the same thing for the Rangers games. In fact, I'm a huge Ranger fan. I'm a huge Knick fan too. But the only time I'll go to Knick game is for free, because they've been overcharging for Knicks tickets for quite a while. But unless somebody hooks me up with tickets, I'm not going. For Ranger games, I'm gonna go to one, and I'm a huge New York Ranger fan. But they're so fucking expensive that it's a lot cheaper for me to go to another city entirety, like New Jersey. I've gone to the Ranger games in Boston, in Washington D.C., in Buffalo, New York, and it's cheaper for me to go rent a hotel and make a weekend of it in one of those cities than what it is for me to go to a Ranger game. I've had ice tickets for the Rangers at Buffalo, right next to the fucking Ranger bench, like where you could talk to the motherfuckers. And for shitty Ranger tickets, I would have paid the same thing, and I got a hotel in Boston. In Baltimore for that same price. Baltimore in Buffalo for that same price. So to sell out at MSG, it's really easy. Every Knick game for the most part sells out, and they always have sucked. You see celebrities there like Rihanna or whoever, during the time that these teams like fucking stink for the Knicks. So to sell out at MSG is an easy feat, and it's almost like a shoo-in. And we all know at this point that Anthony Joshua versus Ruiz didn't sell out. It wasn't a sellout. There was tickets available left and right. Also, too, one of the things I wanted to bring up, if you guys don't believe me, a lot of this information that I'm telling you is it's available to the public. But one thing that we could compare Deontay Wilder's clout as far as selling tickets to is a lot of the concerts that are have happened at MSG at the Barclays Center. You'll find very few or not many bands or acts that have sold more than Wilder has sold at the Barclays Center. I mean, a lot of the ones that have sold, it's like when they know for sure it's like a humongous not band, because I'm not like, even big bands don't sell like what Wilder has sold at the Barclays Center. A lot of times it's bands that are like all big and hot at the same time. So a lot of the Wilder's recent fights have sold just as much as like Justin Bieber concerts. I don't give two shits about Justin Bieber, but like I'm just like using it as a comparison. But a lot of the humongous concerts that have sold like 25,000, like they've been like bands like Mumford and Sons, who I could care less about them too, but like at that time I guess they were like hot when they were going to Barclays, and like they were a big band, and I guess things coalesced like where they sold a lot. But Wilder like numbers, like as far as his ticket sales like at the Barclays Center, have been in line with like Justin Bieber, with Bruno Mars. When it comes to other acts, like one of the ones I looked up was like Lionel Richie. Lionel Richie was selling like 6,000 at the Barclays Center, where Wilder was selling like 13,000. Bieber was selling like 14,000. Bruno Mars was selling in that same line like 14,000. There's a lot of acts. I could name countless. I would, if I could recall offhand, there were probably like 3/4 more like people that sold way less than what Wilder sold when he was at the Barclays. You name it, like humongous bands or like humongous acts have sold a ton less than what Wilder has sold with his recent fights. There was one like where there was like a Barrett I think it was Barrington Levi, fucking UB40, and a couple like other real big name reggae acts. They probably sold like 6,000. So that just goes to show like that a lot of the things that Wilder is doing, it's not like shoo-ins. If Wilder would have fight at MSG, I'll tell you right now, guaranteed that'd be a immediate sellout. And that's not like a hard thing to do. But a lot of the path that Wilder has taken, and I'm not saying that it's by his choice, has been a pretty rough like path. I think that the Barclays Center benefits a lot more from Wilder fighting there and lending him cachet with his name than what they give Wilder, like as far as helping him sell tickets. Like that whole Brooklyn boxing like clothing line and stuff started pretty much like around the time when PBC and Wilder started doing matches at the Barclays Center. So I mean, I think with them it's a more of a two-way relationship rather than like with MSG where everybody in the world knows MSG. Even the guy who's the president of North Korea, I was watching a documentary of his yesterday, and he said that he told Dennis Rodman that it was his dream to go to a basketball game in the United States, and he mentioned Madison Square Garden as like his dream destination, like to go to. So it's a lot easier to sell there than what it would be at the Barclays Center. I think the Barclays Center, if anything, and I got all the love in the world for Brooklyn, which also Wilder sold more than fucking Jay-Z at Barclays Center, with the exception of Jay-Z's first like concerts which he was doing at the Barclays Center. Wilder outsells Jay-Z at the Barclays Center, or does comparable numbers to what Jay-Z does, Brooklyn's own at Barclays. But I think with Wilder lends more name recognition to Barclay than like any help that the Barclay does as a location in helping him sell tickets. That's all. Like keep checking out for my videos. I'm trying to make a few more, like, or one more today, but it's gonna have to do with the Mets. Thanks. I hope you guys enjoy your week. Peace.